Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming in. We are getting ready to receive our honored guest tonight, this afternoon. Please, may I just ask the third seat, that's where senior management is sitting. And if the students could, just, and the council members too as well. Okay, I'll just say a little bit of this because thank you. Can some of the students move across? There's still some seats there. Please, students, this is your day. Oh, that thing is off. This thing is off. Okay. Okay. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and the students and the staff of the University of the South Pacific. It's not till 4:30 that our chief guest will arrive, but thank you for coming in early and finding a seat, and there's still some seats available. Please make your way to those seats. And they should have a program by your seat, and that is the sequence of events today. I'm very calm because earlier on, I was told by the director of IT to remain calm. And soon after that, the light went out. So I wasn't calm anymore, but I'm calm now that the light is on. So let me just say a few housekeeping while we're waiting. Please, we ask that you switch your mobile to silent. Thank you for doing that. And also, like I've alluded you to the program, and because we want to stay on time, we will be able to allow you with some questions, and we do expect students to ask as many questions as possible. I'm told that she can allow 2 or 3 questions, so it all depends. So we'll see how that works. And the entrance to the left, that is where the Honourable Prime Minister will enter and will exit. So we would like you, as she comes in, to all be upstanding. And also when she leaves, we want everybody to be also upstanding. And ladies and gentlemen, the entire program will be streamed live through the USP website to our campuses across the region, and can also be viewed around the world. So people from the other side of the globe will be seeing you this afternoon. We are also fortunate to have our friends from the local and international media covering the New Zealand PM's visit, who will also be moving around the room and taking pictures. So please be mindful of the location of the cameras so they don't move them. Right, for safety, now we have to be aware of our safety since there are so many of us here. Kindly note that the various exits to the back is at the back of the room. And the side door to my left is also access for those of us who are down here. And also there's an exit at the wings of the performance area. In case of emergency, please do not panic, remain calm, and be at peace. And we would like to wait. If there is any, no, we've been praying there will no be disaster today. We will receive the instructions from the OHS warden, who will direct us to where we should go. So hopefully he's here with us at this point in time. Please make sure there is no smoking around here. It's a smoke-free zone here in the ICT, and please observe that. And washrooms, our washrooms are located just outside, and it's across the hallway to your left. So that concludes our housekeeping announcements, and I thank you for listening. And so please wait patiently, and please, during the formal function, we ask you to remain seated. Nobody should leave the room, and to just stay flexible and be happy for this afternoon. So let us then wait for our chief guest. I think Jay came, and he was anxious that I don't start singing before the Prime Minister arrives. I won't do that because Bruce is here to pray for us during the ceremony. Thank you. We'll wait for the honored guest to come when it's 4:30. Please, those people who are still standing there, there's still some seats around here. Make your way down here. And we want everybody to be seated by the time that is there, 4:25. We would like everybody to be seated. Thank you.
Do you want me to turn it on?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's got a constant thing there.
Okay.
What would that be?
Nothing, eh?
See at the top there, that line at the top?
Yeah. Check, check, check 1 2.
Do it again.
Check 1 2.
Please, may I ask all those people who are still making their way in to come quickly and be seated. Our honored guest will be arriving shortly, and we want everybody to be seated and awaiting her arrival when she comes. And may I remind everyone again, your mobile to be on silent mode, and please, by 25 past 4, that there will be no movement. I don't mean that we'll be stiff, but except that you can move your legs, but I meant no standing up and moving around. So thank you for your patience, and thank you that we welcome the students who are coming in. Thank you for coming in big numbers this afternoon. Thank you. I've been told that the Honourable Prime Minister is almost here. She is on her way. She is at Vatuanga Primary at this point in time. Please do come quickly and be seated. please be upstanding to receive the Right Honourable Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. Thank you. Be seated. Thank you. Thank you. The Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, Honourable Minister for Education Rosie Akbar, Vice Chancellor and President, Professor Paul Alwalia, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Council and Senate members and senior management, staff and students of the University of the South Pacific, ladies and gentlemen. This is indeed a beautiful afternoon. We have been blessed in the morning with the rain, although a few blackouts here before you came in, Honourable Prime Minister. I was all calm till the blackout went out, but I'm calm now. Nisambula Vinaka. Warm greetings to all those who are joining us live stream from our campuses across the region and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, our program this afternoon begins with a prayer, and I invite Dr. Bruce Yates, the USB chaplain, to come and lead us in the prayer.
Let us come together as one in prayer. Let us pray. Respecting the diverse faith, spiritual, indigenous, and scientific traditions permeating Pacific communities and among all present this afternoon, weaving together the matting of life, honoring the cultural heritage of our island nations, living our relationship with land, sea, and sky, standing in solidarity with all in Christchurch. We are called to greet one another and value everyone and everything. May this Talanoa contribute to formulating global ethics, educating the heart, being quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, teaching love, compassion, justice, tolerance, and peace. And as you navigate life's journey, may the wellspring of the love within you be poured forth, such that your hearts may sing, your works be fulfilling, serving, celebrating our sea of islands, its inhabitants, and beyond, with a greater sense of vision and purpose. For this we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yates, for beautiful prayer. I will now invite the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of the South Pacific, Professor Paul Alwalia, to deliver his welcome remarks, and also to introduce our Right Honourable Prime Minister, Professor Pal Alwalia.
Thank you. Thank you, Akinisi. The Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Honourable Rosie Akbar, Minister for Education, Heritage and Arts, Fiji, the Honourable Mary Sina Waiwanga, Minister for Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation, Your Excellency, Mr. Jonathan Kerr, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji, Excellencies and Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of the crop organizations, members of the University Council, Senate, senior management team, staff and students, and I don't want to forget Dame Meg Taylor from PIFS, members of the media, and ladies and gentlemen. Bula Vinaka, Namaste, and warm Pacific greetings. I can see how special today is just from the number of people in the audience, plus the number of people standing outside. It's a great occasion for the university, and we welcome all of you here today as well. So a special welcome to those of you, as indicated by Akinisi, who are reaching us through live stream across our 14 campuses for this momentous occasion. On behalf of the University of the South Pacific, it's my honor and privilege to welcome the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, to our Laucala campus. Welcome, Prime Minister. We're delighted to have you here. As you may well know, New Zealand has a very long association with this university, spreading back to 1968. Historically, the land that we're located on here at Laucala was the home of the 5th Squadron of the Royal New Zealand Air Force from 1942 to 1967. And New Zealand has been our valued partner for over 51 years, and its support for the university has been steadfast. We're certain that this partnership will continue to flourish well into the future. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, New Zealand has been instrumental in supporting many developments at the university, among which is our telecommunications network, through which we are actually reaching our other campuses, and by funding the initial USP-NET satellite. And New Zealand is currently supporting the upgrade of this network across all regional campuses in our 12 member countries. I mentioned USP-NET, as I could mention a lot of other areas, primarily because it's so crucial to the university as it connects our students across our member nations. It's also important to mention here that the Government of New Zealand provides about 130 scholarships annually for regional students to study at the University of the South Pacific. And today, some of these students are in the audience, and I'm sure they're very eager to hear from you, Prime Minister. As the premier tertiary education provider in the Pacific, our regional character is reflective of our 12 member countries and students from across the Pacific, making USP a dynamic center of learning, teaching, research, and innovation. Our alumni are represented in the region and beyond. Many have become national leaders, ministers, professionals and captains of industry, and influential cultural advocates who shape public policy and guide Pacific countries as they address challenges such as climate change. And it would be remiss of me to remind all of you that, of course, our Honourable Minister, Rosie Akbar, is one of our own alumnus. Prime Minister, I hope you will take with you fond memories of your visit to our university, an institution, as I've said, that New Zealand has supported to becoming a leading university in the Oceania region. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to introduce our guest of honor. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was born in Hamilton, New Zealand, and grew up rurally. She attended high school before graduating from the University of Waikato with a Bachelor of Communication Studies in Politics and Public Relations. Obviously, my discipline, so very honored to have a fellow political scientist in the room. Post-university, she worked as an advisor in the office of the then Prime Minister Helen Clark in London for the Government Cabinet Office, and as an assistant director in the Department for Business and Enterprise, and on a review of policing in England and Wales. The Prime Minister joined the New Zealand Labour Party at the age of 18 and entered New Zealand Parliament in 2008. Over her 9 years as a representative, she's been a strong advocate for children, women, and the right of every New Zealander to have meaningful work. She became the MP for the Auckland electorate, Mount Albert, in early 2017, and the leader of the Labour Party in August 2017. As well as Prime Minister, she holds the roles of Minister for National Security and Intelligence, Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, and Minister for Child Poverty Reduction, an issue particularly close to our heart. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Tu hei mōri ora, te whare e tūnei, te marae e tā koto ana, tēnā koroa, e ne mātei māha, haere, haere, haere. Nā tangera whenua o tēnei rohi, tēnā koutou. Tātou nā kānohi e hui mai ana, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nisa Bulavanaka, namaste, assalamu alaikum. And thank you for the warmth of your welcome and the chance to be here today. I do want to start by echoing the acknowledgements already made by the Vice-Chancellor. And I start by acknowledging you and all of your faculty and the students, first and foremost, who have taken the time to come and hear from me today. I want to acknowledge the Minister, and I've enjoyed the company of so many of the politicians here in Fiji from across the political spectrum while I've been here, and I thank you for the time that you have given me. I acknowledge the High Commissioner and all members of the Diplomatic Corps. Particularly, I want to acknowledge, though, Dame Meg Taylor. We had a chance to meet again this morning. I so value the role, Dame Meg, that you play in the Pacific. But to everyone here, thank you for what you're about to do, which is sit through me talking for a little bit and giving a quite long missive around many things, the heavy question of our relationship, the Pacific's place in the world, and then, after I've done that, I'm going to ask you to ask questions. Now, I'm saying that up front so that I give you forewarning, so that when we come to that moment, we don't all sit in stunned silence as no one wishes to take the microphone. I always much prefer to hear what it is that you're interested in. So rather than me take up this entire slot with me talking, please be prepared that I am going to ask of you to ask of me. But first, a little bit more about me and where I come from, very briefly, and how where I came from, in many ways, is how I came to be here doing this today. In my past is my present. Now, I grew up in two small towns in New Zealand. By New Zealand accounts, they were small anyway. I'm talking something like 3,000 people. So not quite island small, but small enough. And it was living in a little town called Murupara, which I assure you, even in New Zealand, no one knows where that is. In a little town called Murupara that taught me about issues like inequality. Now, in the 80s and 90s in New Zealand, we went through a very rapid period of privatisation and economic liberalisation. And it was called, loosely in those days and since, it was called Rogernomics. It was named after the finance minister of the time. Now, there are a lot of reasons why that happened at that particular time and place in New Zealand. But the upshot, the consequence of that for people, were that factories closed, jobs were lost. At the same time, further down the track, we saw cuts to our welfare system. And ultimately, the poorest really found themselves in a particularly difficult period. And at the same time, the inequality in New Zealand started to grow. Now, I was a child and a teenager when all of this was going on, and I did not walk around shaking my heads and muttering Rogernomics. But I do remember seeing the consequences of it, and I remember seeing particularly the impact that it had on children. I built my social conscience as a schoolgirl, and amongst the very first values that I learnt were those really basic values that in New Zealand are so important to us, like fairness. And amongst my first dislikes were injustice. That and the bus ride to school on a cold morning. So when I became Prime Minister, I, of course, had the privilege of allocating all of the portfolios. So I took for myself two things. One, the arts and culture portfolio, because that shapes who we are as a society and our identity. and the other was child poverty reduction, because I wanted to do something about what I saw around me all of those years ago. So that is a very brief story of some of my founding values. And my question to all of you today is, what are yours? What drives you? What motivates you? What injustices do you see before you that you will seek to change? Because the New Zealand that I live in today, it's different than the one that I grew up in. And the Pacific that you lead tomorrow will be different to the one that you currently inhabit. So how do you want to shape it? What kind of Pacific do you wish to see in the future for your children and your grandchildren? And also, what is it about our characters and our values as Pacific neighbours that can help shape the solutions to the challenges we face? Because as a Pacific family, we are facing some very real and genuine challenges, and we feel the impact of those acutely. But these are not challenges you experience on your own. They are challenges that we all share. Now, New Zealand is a Pacific country. We share history, culture, in many ways politics, family, and rugby sevens. As part of the Pacific family, we are deeply conscious that our identity, our security, and ultimately our prosperity is inextricably linked to yours. We have, in a very genuine sense, a shared Pacific future, perhaps now more than we ever had before. And so what does that future look like? Climate change continues to have a significant impact on the people of this region. As coasts erode, sea levels rise, and fish stocks move, and I know this is not just a hypothetical here, it is a reality. And it is in the places that I have seen with my own eyes, be it here in Fiji, be it in Tuvalu, be it in Tokelau, be it in Samoa, each place has their own story of the impacts of climate change. If we add to that the challenge of economic resilience, distance to market, and creating employment opportunities, but with perhaps the exception of the climate crisis, these challenges are not new. But what is new is the ever-increasing global interest in the Pacific region, in your home. Pacific Island leaders last year noted at the Pacific Island Forum that alongside the impact of climate change, increasing strategic competition was exacerbating our region's particular vulnerabilities. Now that serves to highlight why now more than ever our Pacific values must be at the fore, and that includes the value of cooperation. We here in the Pacific have long known that we are so much stronger and so much more effective when we speak with one voice and act as a region, both here and into the world. And last year as leaders, we highlighted the importance of maintaining that regional solidarity and encouraging engagement in the region that aligns with and supports Pacific priorities and values. How else in this contested strategic world, how else do we maintain our voice and our strength? And so here and now, I am recommitting New Zealand to supporting and investing in Pacific regionalism. After all, what happens in New Zealand or Fiji or anywhere else in the Pacific affects all of us. The artificial lines between what we call domestic policy and international policy are just that, artificial. When we're trying to address issues such as climate change or infectious diseases or transnational crime, borders don't matter anymore. These are borderless challenges, and they demand a collective response. And thankfully, collectivism and cooperation, listening and understanding one another's needs, that's the Pacific way. That's why under the auspices of the Pacific Islands Forum, leaders have called for the development of a 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific to provide that long-term vision of what we want to achieve together for the region. And it's also why, at the last Pacific Island Forum, leaders issued the strongest collective statement on climate change that we have ever released. It recognises that there is no greater priority, no greater collective challenge than the need to address the impacts of climate change. And it's why New Zealand announced at the Pacific Island Forum last August a $150 million package for Pacific-focused climate change assistance as part of a wider commitment to invest at least $300 million globally in climate-related assistance over the next 3 years. Now, out of that $150 million, we've already approved projects worth roughly $98 million in areas such as water security and even right through to invasive species, which are more prolific as a result of our changing environment. Today, I'm pleased to add to that. Today, I'm announcing that New Zealand is also making, under this program, a $2 million dedicated investment in supporting Fiji to manage one of the most confronting issues that climate change has already brought, the displacement of communities. While we must do all we can to mitigate and prevent the full frontal assault of climate change, we must also prepare. And that's exactly what's happening here in Fiji. We are contributing to the establishment of Fiji's Climate Relocation and Displaced Peoples Trust Fund for Communities and Infrastructure. It was launched in September. It's a world first that aims to sustainably and sensitively manage the relocation of some of Fiji's most threatened communities. With 5 community relocations underway or completed in Fiji and a further 40 identified, this is an issue for the here and now. I once said climate change was my generation's nuclear-free moment. Now that was a reference to how the generation before me had fought and won nuclear-free status for New Zealand, a position that we also fought for in the Pacific, especially supporting Pacific nations in their opposition to French nuclear testing in our region. So what is climate change to you? What injustice that you see now will motivate you to act and to achieve more than what is currently being achieved? And most importantly, what can you do to help bring the Pacific together as we address those challenges? Now, it's fitting that I'm here talking about the importance of regionalism and leadership at the University of the South Pacific, a training ground for future leaders and current leaders, I should add. The USP is an example of regionalism in action, jointly owned by the governments of 12 Pacific countries, and so very important to our region, being the largest source of tertiary educated graduates in the Pacific for over 50 years. Many Pacific leaders and politicians have studied at USP. No pressure. But all of these organisations, whether it's USP, whether it's PIF, they're components of regional architecture. Now, these partnerships, whether they're young or old, they all distill down into both a challenge and in which also lies the solution. We are living in an increasingly borderless world. The desire of superpowers in the face of globalization has been to exert their power and show signs of strength and influence. Our region is no longer a place of blue ocean, alone, but strategically important. And all of that adds up to a difficult position for small island nations, but not for ones that have the architecture and the connection and the cooperation that we have as a region, that has a clear understanding of our joint challenges, of what our shared values are, and a willingness to work together because of it. In a tough world, the Pacific Way can be and is the answer. We need to and will continue to focus on and invest in the people of our region. So ultimately, our children and our grandchildren will be able to continue to live fulfilling lives across this blue Pacific continent of ours. And I finish by thanking you for being here today, for caring about our region and our region's future. And I encourage you, the leaders of both today and tomorrow, to continue to work collectively, to think creatively about ways to address the challenges of our region and the challenges of our time. Vanaka vakalevu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Prime Minister, for your very inspiring talk and a lot of issues you've raised, but now it's a time when the questions will be asked, as you've already indicated. So there are mics, people with the mics who will bring the mics around. Please just put up your hand. This is opportunity to ask questions. particularly from our students.
Oh, look, I see that hand shot up straight at the back. A prize for you.
Can we bring them up?
Hello? Okay. No, I am Maori. My name is Ernest, and I am from the Pacific Youth Council. And I'm speaking a little bit fast because you are genuinely one of my favorite human beings, and I can't believe I'm talking to you right now. But so-
Namahi, thank you, that's kind.
Thank you. So as
I hope I don't disappoint you.
You haven't, don't worry. So as I mentioned, I'm from the Pacific Youth Council, so I want to ask a question that is around youth. So we know that we need to ensure that when we design policy and implementation mechanisms that are inclusive of youth from the very beginning. What plans, if you can share these, do you have to ensure that youth are included at the outset, as well as continuously throughout the process of policy design, particularly with regards to this region and bilateral processes? Very
A great
long, I'm
question.
sorry.
No, it's a great question. If you don't mind, I'm going to split my answer into two parts. And the first
for gold.
the first is going to be domestic. I'm going to reflect a little bit on what we do at home, if I may, because I think unfortunately too often we think about empowerment in our systems as being at the point that you can vote, and that is just not true. That is almost the least of the options that we have to empower our young people. In fact, in New Zealand, I'd like to think our systems are designed that at whatever age, be it a primary school age child or be you a high school student, you can, for instance, come and prepare a submission and present in front of MPs within our parliament, no matter what your age is. And increasingly, our young people are doing that. Climate change is just one example. But that requires them to be proactive. I want us to be more proactive. The best example I can use of the way we're trying to change the way we do things is our child and youth wellbeing strategy. So we have a goal, an aspiration in New Zealand. We want it to be the best place in the world to be a child. Not the best place in the world to raise children, but to be a child. So through a child and a young person's lens. Now, how can I say what it is we should do unless I've asked a child what will make a difference to them? So when we prepared that strategy, we prepared postcards that we took out to schools around the country, and we had young people fill them in. What is one thing you'd like to tell a Prime Minister that you think will make New Zealand better for you? And children in their thousands filled in those postcards. And I read every single one of them. And they were so powerful to me that I framed them. They hang on, not all of them, that would be a lot of frames. They hang on my wall as a reminder of the importance of a child's voice. And the thing that struck me the most is I made a lot of assumptions about what children would ask us for. And do you know one of the things that came through more strongly than anything else? Discrimination and bullying. You wouldn't think our smallest children would be experiencing that kind of intolerance at their age, but they were. And so that actually became a key pillar of our strategy because of their voice. So that's one of the things we've done domestically. At a Pacific level, I'd have to say, I feel like your voice does come through quite strongly at a Pacific level. And the greatest manifestation of that to me, at the last Pacific Island Forum, there were two young people who presented to leaders in Tuvalu. And they spoke so powerfully about the impact of climate change on their community that they brought the Prime Minister of Tonga to tears. And he spoke in what turned out to be his last address to Pacific Island Forum about the power he felt in that address and that he wished that he had done more on climate change. And that was through that testimony of those young people. So we need to constantly be mindful that we give you that voice, but you're very good at making sure that you take that microphone and give voice to young people already. So keep going.
Yes, there's somebody there.
Okay. Just so you know, I'm going to be seeking ladies soon. So ladies in the room, just...
Please just introduce yourself, and if you are a student, what program you are doing.
Okay, thank you. My question to you, Madam Prime Minister, is sorry, I would like to introduce myself first.
Please, go ahead.
My name is Dhruv Karan, and I'm a third-year journalism and politics student. My question to you is in relation to climate change. As you have mentioned, displacement of communities. So my question is in line with that. What do we do if the communities do not wish to relocate? Because once you are at a place, and if you are living at a place for so many years, and all of a sudden you're told to move out, and due to that form of attachment, you can't relocate. So how do we go about convincing people to relocate?
Yeah.
And my second question to you is, with regards
He's a journalism student. This is just going to be the way it is from now on.
Okay, it's again related to climate change. Do you think sometimes, I would say sometimes, not always, but sometimes, has it become, the issue of climate change has become a kind of a political ball or something to play with, that it's been talked about too much? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. On the first point around the relocation of communities, I think the sad reality is that for many of those communities, they already know that they're vulnerable, whether or not it's that they're already experiencing significant coastal erosion, or they've experienced ongoing and consistent flooding. Unfortunately, I think they themselves see that necessity. And so for New Zealand, really the funding that we announced today, for instance, that came at the request of the Fiji government, we're the first to contribute to it, but it is being driven by Fiji, for Fiji, and for those communities, by those communities. And I think that's so important. No one wants to be the one coming in and making those decisions on those communities' behalf. That is a matter for Fiji. But I think everyone sees the reality, sadly. What I'm keen to do, though, at our responsibility is to make sure that we don't take it as a given that people are going to have to leave their homes. And in the future, of course, we have to make sure that we have adaptation, but we need mitigation. We need countries around the world to know they have a responsibility to stop people losing their homes, not to accept it as just a future reality, because there are entire island nations that are dependent on us doing our bit to save their homes, not just to save them from moving within themselves, but to save their entire island nations. And we cannot give up on that. So I often move the debate around away from relocation as much as I can, so that no one takes it as a given that people have to lose their homes. On the second, do we talk too much about climate change? We have to talk about it so long as countries aren't doing enough. And unfortunately, that is the reality. Our region is one of the most climate affected regions, but makes the least contribution. That hardly seems fair. And so long as we have that environmental injustice, we have an obligation to keep talking about it. And I have to say, there are parts of the world where you don't hear these conversations. And so we have a job to do to tell people about the realities of what we see in the Pacific.
Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister. Honourable Prime Minister is generous with her time, so I will allow 2 more questions.
Great. We have a young woman in the middle there. I've just picked the hardest place to reach in the entire room, right there. And then you have been so enthusiastic. I acknowledge that, so, okay.
But he's not a student, he's an alumni.
Oh, he's not a student.
No, he's an alumni.
Alumni. Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Prime Minister. Sorry, forgive me, I'm a bit nervous. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you.
My question is around, as leaders around the world and in the Pacific, most of the fundings are surrounded around climate justice, climate change, DRR, DRM. And I feel like as a youth and as a human rights advocate that facts like human rights violations as well as social justice fundings are being cut short because most of the chunks of money is really climate related, and if you do not have climate change within your proposal, most of the proposals gets chucked out. So what is the strategy around Pacific Island nations to ensure that the fundings really are not just climate related, but also social justice and other factors?
A good point. These are not mutually exclusive.
And also,
Oh, bless. There's a first for everything. That hasn't happened to me before. Bless you. We're definitely going to get a photo after this, you and me. These cannot be mutually exclusive issues. And of course, I can't speak from the perspective of an organisation trying to enhance or promote human rights issues in the region. So I can't say whether or not at a global level we're seeing a reduction in some of the international donor support, but I can speak to what New Zealand's doing. We have not reduced what we're doing in other areas as a result of our additional focus on climate adaptation and mitigation. And in fact, so much of what we're doing in the climate space is also so critical to social well-being and development issues. So actually, when you think about, for instance, we just came from a sanitation project that we're helping to support that also is building into it sustainability practices. We equally are making sure that when we're investing in things like renewable energy in the Pacific, that's also about trying to build down the costs of energy, which helps micro-enterprises and so on. So there's much that's linked between the climate change work we're doing and development work that we're doing. But at the same time, just to reflect on Fiji as an example for New Zealand, we're supporting the Ministry for Women who will be undertaking their first gender review under the auspices of the United Nations. We're working alongside the Ministry for Women and supporting them in the work that they're doing on gender-based violence and the action plan that's being developed here as well. So these are not mutually exclusive issues. We have to keep driving in all of these areas and challenges that we mutually face.
We have the final question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much, Jacinda, for being here today with all of us. It's like everyone else here, I'm your fan. However, I just want to firstly congratulate you on how you, when Christchurch happened and the Pacific was shocked, and how you came in and you were the hero with everybody else and the survivors, and how the New Zealand government responded. And the best point there was, you know, your conversation with Trump. And I said to somebody, I said, she is it. She is it, you know. So thank you very much.
No pressure.
So thank you very much for that. So the reality in Fiji is, and I don't know if people have talked to you about it, is in Fiji there is a lot of Islamophobia. There is a lot of demonization about the Indo-Fijian community. I mean, just last week somebody made a statement that, you know, the Indo-Fijians were trying, you know, some people have labeled as the source of all evil, or the weed. You know, a few years ago, one of the politicians called us the weed in the grass, and there was weed killer needed. So there is a segment of the society that 140 years later have not accepted us and still call us Vulangis or visitors to this date on our faces. What would be your one advice to these people who actually thrive on hate and you know, still have not to this date accepted us? And we are as much as Pacific Islanders as anybody else is. The other thing is, when your government is giving in grants, and last week I was at a Pacific Climate Action Network meeting, one of the questions I brought up was, what about the other communities who are affected by climate change? When you look at data, with all due respect to our very respected indigenous community, we know, we accept and acknowledge that if it wasn't about your graciousness, we would not be able to be here. And thank you, and we love being here, and we respect and honor the indigenous culture. However, 140 years later, when we talk about data, where are the other communities? Where it does not reflect. So can New Zealand Development Assistance actually from now onwards make sure that there is some provisions, whether it's for civil society or government initiatives, to represent those data, because there is a gap and there is no representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. You'll forgive me if I speak from the perspective of where I sit in New Zealand, because of course, you know, I haven't personally experienced the history, the culture, the community here within Fiji, and I'm always very careful about not standing from afar and offering missives when I don't have that context. But I can speak to what I believe, from what I've observed as a politician in a globalized world today. I think we're living in a world where, as I said, increasingly we are borderless. And so that means many things. It means that we're actually having some very similar experiences. That in a globalized world, as we trade with one another more often, as you know, we see the same challenges like digital transformation, things that have the chance to enhance the well-being of all of us, but actually have also the potential to leave people behind. And people have been left behind. You'll be hard-pressed to find a community where there hasn't been division driven out of the fact that people have been left behind. Whether it's the inability to find work, displacement, whether or not it's the fact that you can no longer guarantee a safe, stable home, and whether or not it's Indigenous communities who experience that or migrant communities that exists around the world. Now, in the face of that, politicians around the world all have different choices. We can either say, actually, that globalization is a reality, and that in that reality, we have an obligation to actually stand up as politicians and say, we have a responsibility to you to meet your everyday needs, to make sure you have housing, to make sure that you have your basic human rights met, to make sure we do everything we can to ensure that the next generation have decent employment opportunities with decent conditions and decent wages. And we take responsibility for driving that instead of blaming anyone else, instead of blaming any other ethnicity or community, instead of blaming an institution like maybe the World Trade Organization or anything like that, instead of blaming other, just taking responsibility ourselves. And this is something that I've repeated, not specifically to any country or any nation, but at the UN, that has always been my pitch, because this is what I feel I observe at a global level. And I'm not speaking here directly in any way, but just saying this is what I feel like I see globally. So that responsibility comes back to us, because actually at our heart, we all have a shared humanity, and nothing for me demonstrated that more than what we had the experience of in New Zealand. Underneath, we all mourned together. We all felt a huge sense of grief. We all felt that we had a duty of care to our community, our Muslim community, who are us, part of us. We had a duty of care, and many people, we felt there was a failure there. And then within that shared humanity, I think we again saw that when you strip it all back, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, regardless of the language we speak, we all need those basic rights met, and we all have a duty to provide them. So that is my view. That is my view of the global challenges that we face, the shared humanity that we have, but the potential that exists for us to promote that as people. And for me, that is the only way we will succeed, the only way. So I'll keep doing my bit from our little corner of the world to promote that way of living and life, and distilled down to its most simple, it's the value of kindness. And I do believe it is a Pacific value. So thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honourable Prime Minister, for those words of wisdom. At this stage, I will now ask the Vice-Chancellor Professor Paul Alwalia, to present our gift to the Prime Minister. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this marks the conclusion of our formal program. Please give another round of applause for the Right Honourable. Thank you very much, Honourable Prime Minister. Our chief guest, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Honourable Rosie Akbar, Minister for Education, Heritage and Arts, Your Excellency, Mr. Jonathan Kerr, New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji, members of New Zealand delegation, Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, Dame Meg Taylor, representatives of crop organizations, members of council, senior management team, staff and students, invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the management, staff and students of the University of the South Pacific, indeed, I'm privileged this afternoon to move the vote of thanks. We thank and express our heart appreciation to the Right Honourable Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern for visiting the university and giving us your life story. That was really beautiful. And not only that, that this afternoon your speech is very relevant to the region, and also you have affirmed the continued Bubale concept with Fiji, and also our collaboration and our continued bondage through not only Fiji Rugby 7, but various other ways. I'm sure we have, tonight, I have been touched by what you've said, in particular, touched by the tremendous help that New Zealand is giving to the Pacific. Madam Prime Minister, your commitment and support to the Pacific region, and indeed to the university, is very much acknowledged by our Vice Chancellor and President, and it is very substantial. Thank you very much. Let's give a hand. But also I must thank you sincerely for the tremendous help that has been given to the Fiji government about relocation of those affected by climate change. Even though there may be discussion about relocation issues, but I think it is very much needed. And also, I'm wearing the hat of a Fiji citizen. Thank you very much for the generosity of the New Zealand government. The university will not be what it is today without New Zealand and, of course, our development partners and our member countries' support. Thank you, Envina Kavakalevu, for the financial support that you are giving to the university. And not only that, but the scholarships that are given to the students. Some of them are sitting here today. Let me also thank the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the New Zealand High Commission, in particular, His Excellency Jonathan Kerr, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji, and your staff for the advice and support to our team at USP in the preparation of this visit. And at this point, I must say that I'm also the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Law and Education, and thank you for that question about, giving support to humanity programs, particularly social programs like gender. I'm particularly happy about that there will be more support given to those humanities programs. Let's give a hand for that. Honourable Minister, I dare not look at to my colleagues from the science and the business and economics, but we do appreciate all the support that you're giving us. And of course, our special thanks this afternoon goes to the Fiji government for making USP part of the Honourable Prime Minister's program. I thank Honourable Rosie Akbar, Minister for Education, Heritage and Arts, for being here today, not only to receive the Honourable Prime Minister of New Zealand, but also as an alumni, you've always given your support readily to the university. Our appreciation is also accorded to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Fijian Affairs, Fiji, and his team for their leadership and guidance to USP for all the arrangements that is done today. I hope, Madam Prime Minister, that you have enjoyed your short stay and your visit and interaction with the students who are here, although we would have liked to have more questions. But, you know, this afternoon you've handled all the questions. And I've allowed all the questions to be asked, so I'm not, the one who asked the last question is a special friend, so, you know, he will ask all those questions, but thank you for answering. This is what the forum is about. And we sincerely hope that you will have the opportunity to visit us again in the future, but for a longer time. Finally, let me thank our invited guests, and in particular, the students who are here today. I'm sure before Madam Prime Minister leaves, there will be an opportunity to have photograph with her. So with those, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask the students, especially those who are recipients, to come forward and have a photograph with the Honourable. Oh, they will sit there, right? They're already sitting there. And please, the rest be seated. We are not over yet. Only the students to have the photograph taken. Can I just ask all the students to move in so that there is a particular focus for the photographers, for the media, please? All the students who are standing there, please, can you just come down? My dear students, can you move a little bit faster? Now you can shake your hands and come down.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Right, that's better. Thank you. Can we just move in? Right, can you please? Thank you. Is that okay? Sorry. Hey! Before we stand, students who are scholarship holders, it's not often you get the scholarship, it's very hard. I think, you know, this is not in the program. Let's give a cheer to our Honourable Prime Minister. 3 cheers for our Honourable Prime Minister, hip hip. Hooray! Oh, that's too soft, hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Kyla. Hooray! Thank you. Well, please be seated. Please be seated. We will... We will now ask, before the Prime Minister leaves, we will ask everybody to be upstanding before she leaves the room today. Bella?
Thank you for playing it so cool.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, that's
You
okay.
have to
Don't worry.
never be so shy. We're gonna go take a selfie, excuse us.